My name is Michael Crump. I work in Azure on the application development team. And what that means is that we do a lot of different types of content, from things like ebooks, blog posts, to video content. And recently, I've been doing this thing called live streaming. Live streaming, which we're going to get into very shortly. I primarily used it for an open source project that I was working on in order to kind of get the word out, get folks contributing, get people like adding issues, seeing, helping me update the site as well. And so I want to share kind of how I got to that. You can contact me in a couple of places. Twitter, my DMs are always open for pretty much as long as I was able to turn those on and for those to be open. I'm also on Twitch, twitch.tv mbcrump. So I thought I would start by just showing you a little taste of what it's kind of like in a day of the life. So hopefully this video comes through pretty well. And I'm not sure if you're able to hear any audio. So what you're seeing here is this is a couple of different people that is doing live streaming, and they're talking about some of their own projects. And this is some of the kind of the fun that they're having as they kind of go through it. So these are a couple of samples of folks that they're in VS Code, they're in other types of editors, IDEs, and they're showing their projects live to a handful of people. And sometimes it could be even more than that. It could be sometimes people get up to like 100, 150, 300 types of folks. And so a couple of samples here. I just wanted to kind of just let you kind of see what it's kind of like and the kind of the fun and the interactivity that you're able to get with this. So, and I'll go over to the next slide here. Okay, so goals. What are we really trying to do here? The very first thing, with with open source projects, this is kind of the new avenue where we're actually going where the developers are actually at. And so I'm seeing more and more engagement on platforms such as Twitch. And there's not only is more and more developers kind of moving towards that and this live coding experience. You'll see very shortly it's where folks are joining in more collaboration than a lot of the other areas where I've tried with like blog posts and things of that nature. The second piece here was gaining the mind share. So your project that you've created, it's going well and everything like that, but is it actually something that people are starting to see? Are they able to use it? How are you kind of getting your project out there? And then third, it's really more around the lines of driving adoption and hopefully some PRs, as you'll see in one of the projects that I recently have been working on. So with live streaming, there's a couple of providers here. And one thing I wanted to state was that with live streaming, you can think of this entirely as it's media that is being recorded and broadcast in real time, similar to what we're doing here, or exactly what we're doing here. There is a couple of major providers that's in this game, and so I've kind of listed out at least the top 4. So I find personally with Twitch is probably my number 1 choice. It's at least the one that I have been using for a while, and the reason for that is that while folks may think that like Twitch or Mixer or any of these things is just for gaming, there is actually a very vibrant developer community on that. And sure, it may be we don't really have as many people as maybe some of the other like a game or like a League of Legends or like a Fortnite, but there's still a sizable audience for you to kind of explore there. YouTube is technically, just a second. So YouTube is another area, and with YouTube, what I found is that a lot of people feel that as if it is more of like video that's already on demand. Not necessarily as much as not necessarily as much as like with Twitch, and especially with YouTube. There's so many people that's out there. It's very hard to discover. And then there's Facebook, and then there's Mixer, and then there's a bunch of others. Others could be like Periscope and more. And how I typically pull the data of what type of providers that I'm kind of looking at is this blog down here. It's called blogs.streamlabs.com. They produce a monthly, I think it's monthly or quarterly, report that kind of lists the major providers and also tells a little bit more about the types of subjects and topics that folks are interested in. Hopefully my screen is still sharing there. And so I have a typical setup here. The typical setup that I have is there is the screen that is right here. So this is usually a screen sharing capability. Then there is a chat. The chat is where there is live interactive viewers. And also there is host. And I put here one or more hosts. And that's very true. Because what I do is I actually host my show with my son and also with my daughter at some time. So that's kind of the makeup of it. And then from there, a couple of ways to broadcast. And it starts typically with your favorite open source project. And then it kind of goes into creating a Twitch account. And I'm going to limit a lot of this to just to Twitch for this conversation. Getting the stream key and then setting it up inside of a software. There's OBS and Streamlabs, which we're about to jump into. Doing the stream setup and then finally starting to stream. And as far as the hardware goes, you can use any of the hardware that or operating system that you like. So Windows, Mac, and Linux. Even though I'm hosting this presentation on Mac OS, I typically stream on a Windows box. And I'll talk about that in a bit. The next thing is getting a good web camera. I use like a Logitech Brio. There's plenty of great webcams that you can get for very, very inexpensive. I'm talking about like less than $50. And then having a good microphone. So don't just use your PC or your Mac or other machine microphone, built-in microphone. You're going to want to invest at least in a fairly good microphone. The fourth thing that I have here is proper lights. I spent quite a bit of time, and if you look at previous streams that I did, it was very hard for me to figure out how to get the lighting configuration. So things such as floor lights, other things such as adding in overhead type of lights. There's a couple of recommendations that I will give you for that, but don't ever, like, if there's anything that you shouldn't cheap out on besides the mic and the camera, it's the lights. And then also always have a hardwired internet connection. Yes, I know that sounds like a no-brainer, but I did this many times trying to use like a Wi-Fi, even though I have like points all across my house. And then the last piece here is having a very good capture card. Some people don't use capture cards and some do. The thing with the capture cards is that it really gives you a lot of flexibility, especially in two PC stream setups. So for example, if you have one PC that's just for your streaming PC, and then you have another PC that's like running your like Visual Studio or Eclipse or one of those others, you typically would want to like separate those out, just because the broadcasting software sometimes can take up a lot of resources. And then when you combine that with like building and debugging and troubleshooting an application, etc., you can easily bog down your machine. And so with that being said, I thought I would spend a majority of this talk just showing you kind of a lap around streaming, at least how I like set it up. So I'll begin right over here with a project that I started. So this project is Azure Tips and Tricks. It was started about a little over a year ago on GitHub, and this project, while it was doing well, it really wasn't getting. It was getting some traction, but it wasn't getting kind of what I wanted. But then, more importantly, was that I needed contributors because there is this website is kind of set up as it's short individual like tips about Azure. I needed people to kind of help me put this together because there was just absolutely too much stuff. And so, like if you look at an example, this is kind of what the site looks like. Then there's like these really short like tips, and you can do things. Come up here, you can like search for the different tips. You can scroll down and you can see the different types of like categories. And so it's just it's an easier way. But the problem was that as I got into like tips, and this is into like 254, like the earlier tips, like 11, 12, or any of those other numbers, it was way too much for me to kind of maintain by myself. So I desperately needed the help of the actual developer community to help me out there. And so after doing that, obviously I started doing much better. So this is the current like site right now, and the only reason I even bring this up is to show you that by using the streaming platforms, I was able to kind of bump this into some of the stats that I had personally like had never seen before. And so with that, one of the things that I wanted to show you was kind of how the magic kind of happens here. So I talked briefly about OBS, and I talked about setting up or downloading OBS or Streamlabs. And what you see here is OBS installed. Now I don't have any of the stuff like really set up here as far as like microphones and all of my different cameras or whatever. This is more kind of just like a test. But you can see that it's really made up of a couple of these pieces. There is scenes, there are sources, and then there's typically the audio mixer. And so with scenes, you can think of this as kind of an easy way to kind of jump back and forth. And so for this example, this is sharing my desktop. Wouldn't want to do that right now, or I'll get that kind of weird screen we just saw. And inside of this, you can start adding in different pieces to a scene. So if I click on the plus button here, there are different types of like display captures. NDI source, you can think of that if you're bringing on a guest, where you can use Skype and where you can like chat with another person. You can also add in just regular text like I have already done on here. Other video sources, this is where you would add in like capture devices, or you may just want to capture a window. But the power of this is primarily having that ability to come in and actually set up this browser scene. So this, for example, is a browser scene that I have that's set up. And what this does is that if there is anyone that is in the chat that drops something into the chat, I can, if I wanted to, select it, and I could hit this button right here. And what this is going to do is this is going to display that on the screen. And so for your open source projects, when folks are actually there, they're on your stream, they're watching it, they love to see their name, and they love to see kind of like a little pop-up saying, hey, we're very interested in your project, or here's a question about it. If it's highlighted, it's great because you can talk to them through it, and then later on, if you wanted to kind of even like reuse that content, which I'm a big believer in, you can easily do that. And you can do things like you can do other things such as like set up nice little transitions between scenes. And so forth. And most of those, you can see some of those are here. Now, this is completely free. There's no cost associated with OBS. There's others that are available, and I mentioned Streamlabs. Streamlabs is great as well, but they only have a Windows streaming client, so you can't actually stream through some of these other sorts of things. So discoverability. So now that we've got our really awesome open source project, we know what software we need. We kind of got a baseline of the type of hardware we might want to start rocking and rolling with. The next thing is creating an account. Now, when you first land on Twitch.tv or even some of the other ones, you always are going to see, especially for now, games are always going to be highlighted because these were platforms that were at least originally, I believe, fully meant for like gaming. But if you click over on the browse button here and you go to this category, which is science and technology, what you will see is these are currently people that is live coding right now. So from things like Vue.js, there's some Twilio testing going on there, Game Chat, C++ dev, and as you kind of scroll down through this category, you'll notice that there is pretty much any type of coding stream that you would absolutely want. And yes, this is kind of the end of the scrolling for this catalog. But the nice thing is that right now there's 4,000 people that's in this category that's watching it right now. So or watching one of these streams right now. So after you see there's some benefit to like landing your project here, the next thing you do is typically create an account. And so obviously once you create an account, you get a thing called a stream key, and inside of the stream key, that's where you usually associate that with your OBS software. So inside of this, you'll see here is like the stream key that's given to you after you create an account. I'm going to close out of OBS. That sound that you just heard just a second ago, I may be able to go back over to it, but that was some of the alerts that was popping up there. Okay, so this is an example of my screen that I'm currently using. And so inside of this, I always kind of have an offline page so folks know that I'm currently offline. And then if they follow on the if they click the follow button, then I'm actually notified every time that or they're notified every time that I go live. And so as I kind of scroll down through this, there's a couple of pieces here that's very important. So and one other thing is, besides just showing this offline screen, you can actually host another developer that's coding. A couple of pieces here in the panels. I find panels probably one of the better places to kind of like advertise or talk about your project. I don't like call it out in like big bold letters or anything, but I also I put links down into it. And so this is, I think, a really great way in case you have a project and maybe you have the sponsor tag set up in GitHub, and if you need sponsors, it's a great way to kind of call that out and let people find it and find out that your project's available for them to check out or even just contribute to. I put in this kind of about just so people know who I actually am. FAQ of some of the things to expect there. Some chat rules, which is always a good thing to have in there because, again, this is the internet and you don't know what people are going to add in there. A little bit of contact information, and then things like Twitter and a schedule and hardware. And so before I move on, for like the hardware, this is basically the two PC setup that I was talking about. So a stream PC, and then I have a programming PC. And then I talk a little bit about the different types of mics and webcams if you want to know the exact model that I was using there. One thing that's inside of this is that while you see all of these panels and a lot of this is static information, there's also the ability to add in extensions. So from here, what you can do is you can go to this page. It's going to be the extensions. And I've already got one set up for kind of like the countdown, but there is a ton of other extensions that you can add in to your panels. Some people, with like a viewer leaderboard. If you scroll down through there, there's more schedules. There's like Google Calendar stuff where it give you automatic like calendar invites. And there is quite a bit more of these, and especially with people that may want to play songs or play music during their stream. Several of that's here, and you can even let the audience like interact and help determine like what's the next song. Personally, I don't use a lot of this type of stuff, especially with music, because of all the copyright. And so if there is a sound, if there is a song that you're playing, and Twitch determines that you've been playing a song that's under a copyright, they will mute that whole part of your video later on. So keep that in mind in case you want to start kind of doing some of that sort of thing. The other thing that I wanted to talk about was this process of, go back over here to it, and this was this process of alerts. So that sound that you just saw, you just heard playing multiple times. That is because I have alerts set up, and it shouldn't be a surprise. This is just simply an alert. This is simply just a browser URL. And so if you go into Streamlabs, for example, and Streamlabs is just what I currently am using for alerts, you can see that there's a couple of different alerts that you can select, and then you can come in here and you can actually test those just by adding that as a browser source. So if I wanted to, if you're always wondering how does people get all those pop-up animations and stuff during stream, they typically set up an alert through something like this. It gives you the URL here. This is the widget URL. And then if you wanted to test it, we're going to do one for sure. Over in OBS, just because right now it's currently tied to it, you'll kind of see, this is the animation that comes through, and you can do a lot with those types of animations. So I'm going to let's see, I may take this one back out. Yeah, and one of the other pieces that comes into this is also this ability for Chatbot. So inside of, let me go back over to this page. And so what you'll see here, this is all about, this is where the folks are typically like chatting from. But there's always information, and there's always a way that you may want to like promote your open source project through this, and you may want to do it automatically, or at least that's how I've been doing it. And so there's many different flavors of chatbots. There's one called Notbot. There's the Streamlabs Cloud Bots. And then also you can like build your own chatbot, which I'll show you an example of one that I've built. But what you'll see inside of this is that whenever I want to promote like my open source project, anybody can run this command, which is # Azure Tips and Tricks. For like social media, people sometimes want to know uptime to like stream, and I do a silly thing where I bring in like push-ups and stuff during my stream, and I do push-ups depending on how many people like follow me during a time. And then there's also timers that you can set up, and so this is also a good thing that if you're starting a stream, you may want to have some sort of interval that it distributes that information out, and then even like a line minimum. A line minimum means how many pieces of chat, or how many times has somebody chatted before it will trigger that timer. So I put mine around 5. I don't really have like a crazy active like a chat stream, and so that typically works out fairly well for me. And yes, and the last thing that I had on chatbots is that I use Python in one of the chatbots that I've kind of created and started playing with. This was originally how I was doing some of the push-ups and stuff. And so I've got full instructions if you want to kind of like figure out if you wanted to actually run one of your own chatbots. I find this is pretty rewarding because it's so easy to kind of get it all up and started and everything. So there is some tips that I have for you, especially if you're running, if you're kind of like getting started and maybe you've you've went ahead and you may have already created a Twitch channel and just about to like start doing it. But one of the hardest things that I always found was that ability to always be talking and to get used to talking, and it could be to yourself. And you'll go through many, many streams where there's 0 people there, or at least I did. And so after a while, it does get better. It gets a lot better. And also, when you get into viewers, having that constant kind of like chat and that relationship, you'll find that some people are going to come to your stream over and over and over again. And you want to take really good care of those people, because they're going to be the ones that's there for you, and also there that's like helping like communicate out some of the stuff that you're doing on there. The other piece that I wanted to say there is that consistency is very important. Finding a normal stream time, a start time and an end time, is something that it's hard to determine at first, but people love like following a schedule, such as like a TV program schedule. So even though I don't watch TV, I know that like there's some like really popular shows out there. I don't know, I hear about The Bachelor, even though I've never watched that show. But folks are used to going there at a certain amount of time and watching that show, or I guess they DVR it. So that's why I think that the schedule's really important. It's got to be a schedule that works for you. I usually stream 2 times a week, typically on Tuesdays and Fridays. But you've got to find something that works around your schedule. And then the other piece here is making your stream actually stand out. So regardless if you're a full-time developer, coder, whatever, it's okay to be a little like silly. And so like on my stream, I typically like have things like I usually wear like glasses from all kinds of like really silly glasses that I will wear on the stream. And yes, the glasses will just keep coming because I've got so many of them. And then, I have a whole bunch of different like caps that I use. And what's kind of fun with all of that is that people will start noticing that, and then they will start sending you, or if possible, they'll start hooking you up with like, oh yeah, I totally would like for you to wear like this cap or whatever. So there's some benefits to kind of making it fun and making it playful. And also like I bring my kids on to my stream because it's even like what I would consider like a little part of like our like just family time, kind of like with hanging out and everything. Another piece here that I had is I wanted to check on the time. Do I still have a little bit of time left?
Yeah, we'll give you maybe 2 to 3 minutes, and then we have one question, I think, so far on the Q&A, and then we might pivot over.
Yes, absolutely. Okay, great. And so the last thing that I was, or one of the other pieces to that, was that inside of another way that folks like stay very connected and after the stream is through Discord. And so, for example, here I'm in one of the public Discord channels of a streamer that streams. And so what you see here is this is his place for you to hang out after the stream and even before the stream or whenever. And there's usually full communities that's built into here where they will all kind of be talking together. And this is really an area that, as long as the community is like built around and interested in your content, they will gather there. And last but not least, you can do this process of multi-streaming, and Restream.io, and though they don't pay me anything, is one area to do that. There's a ton of pros and cons to multi-streaming, and I won't cover like all of those. But I will say that at least for those with a very low audience, it can be a really powerful thing to be able to stream this out to multiple platforms. And like this is my current setup. I send this to Twitch, YouTube, Mixer, sometimes Periscope. LinkedIn has a preview where they're trying to get folks to streaming. And then I'll also send this out to a custom our TMP, which is Facebook, because they don't provide they don't have support for that. So with that being said, that was a whirlwind of stuff. I am going to switch back over to this slide. Uh, so thank you. And so now, if there's any questions, I'd love to chat.
Yep, I think in the Q&A, Dax had a question about, are two computers recommended for live streaming? Is one PC okay if it has enough, if it has high enough specs?
I traditionally I use the two PC setup. You can use one. What I have always found, and I don't know if it is a Windows thing or whatever, but when I'm running, if even if I'm running just OBS or if I'm running Streamlabs, and then you start having to add in some of the additional stuff, like you may have a Stream Deck software that's running, you may have other things that's running on that machine. It can bog it down a little bit, and if you've got two PCs, that's even the better, at least in my opinion. And but if you've got one, there's no reason why you shouldn't at least go ahead and like try it and start, especially as you're kind of like you're getting into things. I would go very low cost at the beginning. So just like I did, I mean, I went low cost with like a microphone that I already had. I used a webcam that I don't know, I think I found somewhere. So it was starting out very, very, very small. And if you actually like it, that's when you'll start investing a little bit more into the stream.
Thank you so much.
Yep. Thank you. Bye bye.